Instead, they do a whole 180 pivot and we're like, you two aren't good enough. You're not entertaining enough. We don't want anything to do with you. We're going to go this way. What the fuck is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to the Kevin Hoop Show. If you guys are new here, don't forget to hit that fucking subscribe button. It's muchly appreciated. And without further ado, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this video. We're talking Jamahal Hill versus Glover Teixeira. That's the main thing I'm going to be talking about in this video because, honestly, the light heavyweight division has kind of been in a mix of the past year, honestly. It started with Jan Blachowicz versus Glover Teixeira, and Jan Blachowicz already kind of had the title when he faced Dominic Reyes. He showed himself that he was definitely the number one guy in the division, but Glover Teixeira quickly changed that opinion of mine. I think Glover Teixeira definitely showed that he was the better fighter, the more experienced fighter for sure, and kind of showed Jan Blachowicz's weaknesses. After Glover wins against Jan Blachowicz, it actually then happened, I think, 6 months later or however many months later. I think it was still all in 2022. Glover then faces Jiri Prochazka, who I don't think a lot of people thought was like the number one contender, or at least thought that he was going to be a big challenge for Glover Teixeira. But when it came down to it, it was probably one of the closest fights we've seen in the UFC. And really probably one of the most entertaining fights we've seen this whole entire year. I rewatched that fight. I didn't watch it live, and immediately right after I watched the first round, I was like, fuck! Why didn't I watch this fight live? Now, honestly, I think I kind of had Glover Teixeira winning that going into the last round, but it doesn't matter because Jiri Prochazka came out in the 5th round, put the submission on him, and ended the fight right then and there. I do think Jiri Prochazka is probably the number one guy in this division right now, with the whole entire shoulder injury that he's experiencing right now, or in December and leading up to his fight in December. I think that is what is a big thing that is going to be a factor to think about when he comes back into the octagon. You see some fighters kind of struggle with an injury, especially of one of that extent. And Dana White said that's one of the worst injuries he's ever had or seen in the UFC, especially to deal with when it comes to recovery. So that's going to be a really big hump I think Jiri Prochazka is going to have to come over and then deal with when coming back into the ring and training, depending on how much mobility and how much motion he actually has compared to before the shoulder injury. Anyways, the shoulder injury happened leading up to the December 10th fight, December 12th fight. It happened in December. Either way, it was supposed to be Jiri Prochazka versus Glover Teixeira, Jiri defending the belt. Jiri got the whole shoulder injury, though, and ended up vacating the belt because I think he knew that it was going to be a good amount of time he was going to be out and have to recover. So, perfectly fine with him vacating the belt. At the time, I kind of thought it should have been an interim belt, but either way, I think it's perfectly fine that it's for the regular belt. With all that controversy, the fight then kind of gets offered to Glover Teixeira to then fight Magomed Ankalaev. Now, I don't necessarily know why Magomed Ankalaev was the staple that had to be fighting somebody in the light heavyweight belt in this fight, because that just seemed like what the UFC was doing. But they offered Glover Teixeira Magomed. Glover Teixeira declined. Then they go to Jan Blachowicz and offer Jan Blachowicz the same fight against Magomed, and Jan Blachowicz accepts. So what do we have for the December pay-per-view? We have Jan Blachowicz versus Magomed Ankalaev. If you didn't watch any of my predictions or analysis of the fight after it happened, stop this video right the fuck now and go back and watch the video, all right? I'll leave the link in the description just to be a nice guy. All right. Now, I wasn't the biggest fan of this fight either, kind of like the Glover Teixeira versus Jiri fight. But because I watched the rematch, or because I rewatched the Jiri and Glover one and noticed that I definitely should have watched it live, it would have been way more exciting. I told myself, you know what? I'll bite the bullet. I'll pay the $75. I'll watch the fight that I wasn't planning on watching anyways. It was a good fight. It definitely was very back and forth. In my opinion, I had Magomed winning, but apparently the judges just thought, we're going to be judges here and just bring it to a draw. Now, right before that, there was the whole Paddy Pimblett controversy. I really kind of think that was a reason why the judges made it go to a draw. I think that there was already so much controversy with the judges and their decision making. So they got away with it there, but I really do think it could have went to Magomed. And either way, we're not the judges. The judges were judges, and we move on. So with that fight now in the books, we're moving on to January 21st. And this fight already had Brandon Moreno versus Davidson Figueiredo as the main card. I really thought, and this is the fourth time that they're fighting, these guys have fought absolute wars. And I've watched each of their first three fights, and I thought all of them were entertaining. Not just one, not just two. Every single one was fucking entertaining from these two. I really thought that this match had main event pay-per-view stats to it. I thought it definitely could deliver. But apparently the UFC said, no, we need a bigger fight than that fight, or we need that one as the co-main event and an even bigger one as the main event. So we have Glover Teixeira versus Jamahal Hill. I don't think that this fight was expected from probably anybody, honestly. If you ask anybody who would have fought after Magomed and Jan, I think a lot of people probably would have said Magomed and Glover, Magomed and somebody else. Maybe Magomed and Anthony Lionheart Smith. I definitely didn't think they were going to be going back to Glover Teixeira after he already declined the fight. I thought that he would have maybe fought Jamahal Hill for the number one contender, Anthony Lionheart Smith for the number one contender, or something along the lines of that. Instead, they do a whole 180 pivot and we're like, you two aren't good enough. You're not entertaining enough. We don't want anything to do with you. We're going to go this way. I definitely think it's an easier fight for Glover Teixeira if you just look at the paper. But honestly, I do think Jamahal Hill is a little bit more of a challenge than people think. He is ranked number 7, but his record's only 11-1. He's on a 3-fight win streak right now. He's only lost once in the UFC, and he looked amazing against Thiago Santos in his most recent fight. So, honestly, I think Jamahal Hill has a lot of momentum behind him. Not only that, but he's also a pretty young guy compared to Glover Teixeira, almost double his fucking age. And I think that he really notices that this is an opportunity for him, that if he goes and takes the opportunity, that can really change his whole entire fucking life. So I think Jamahal Hill notices this and is really putting the pedal to the metal in his training camp and, probably really looking on how to improve his game and on things that he's not good at in his game, in his current game, and trying to improve all of his weaknesses as much as he can in that kind of short amount of time. Because he really only has end of December or early December is when this whole entire fight kind of got announced, middle of December, kind of. And the whole entire January 21st card happens, UFC 284 happens on January 21st. So he basically has a month to prepare, maybe a month and a half or a month and a week maybe. You also have to factor in that whole entire week before the fight happens. He's not going to be training as harder. He's going to be more or less doing kind of warm-up workouts and warm-up training. Now, I talked about it a little bit with Khamzat Chimaev and how that's affected him when it has weight cutting into it. Now, weight cutting probably isn't going to be too much of a factor with this because these guys are maybe already around their weight. Maybe they go up 50 pounds more. I do not know. But hoping that Jamahal Hill was staying around that 225, 230 range. So after fight camp, he only has to cut, 10 pounds, 5 pounds. If he's in that 220 pound range. When it comes to Jamahal Hill being prepared for this fight, I do think that he's going to be mentally ready. He's definitely going to prepare himself mentally and know that this is an opportunity he has to capitalize on. I just don't know if it's enough time for him to get all of his ducks in a row when it comes to his training and his actual striking. And really his grappling defense, I think, is something he's going to have to work on. And Glover Teixeira is definitely going to take him down. I can definitely tell you Glover Teixeira is going to at least level change and show you that he's, might go for the legs. He might go for a takedown. He's definitely going to make you faint for it. So whether Jamahal Hill focuses on that or not, I think is going to be a big factor on whether he takes the win fight night or not. That's all up to him, though. The last thing I want to talk about, which I don't think a lot of other people have been talking about, I saw it a little bit, but Anthony Lionheart Smith is really getting fucking sidelined over here. If you guys don't know, Jamahal Hill was actually supposed to fight Anthony Lionheart Smith in March. It was already scheduled, it was set in stone. Both of them already signed the contracts. So I think it was a little bit of a blindside to Anthony Lionheart Smith, who's actually ranked 6th, one above Jamahal Hill, who's ranked 7th. I think he felt a little bit sidelined when he heard the news, and I definitely would be too if I were him. You know, you fought everybody in the division basically. You fought for the title against John Jones a year, 2-3 years ago. So he's definitely showed that he has the capability of getting to that number 1 contender spot and fighting for the belt. So I'm not really too sure why the UFC didn't pick him. That's definitely all on them. I have no clue why they wouldn't pick him. Maybe it's his pay-per-view numbers. They've seen him on pay-per-view before. They haven't seen Jamahal Hill on pay-per-view. That might be a reason. Jamahal Hill started the headline fights recently against Thiago Santos, so he might be really having a name for himself and might be really getting some traction when it comes to viewership and people following his career. And that's definitely a factor for any fighter when it comes to them getting title shots compared to other people. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. If someone has a following and can bring the UFC more money, they're probably and most likely going to go with that fighter. So it's not really anything against the UFC. I understand it. It's money. It's business, ladies and gents. We're talking business over here. That's really all I've got on this whole entire light heavyweight debacle. It's definitely been quite a mix-up in the past 2 to 3 months on whether Yuri Prohovich is going to fight, whether Glover Teixeira is going to fight. Who the fuck are we actually going to see in these main events for the light heavyweight belt? Hopefully after this January 21st card, it's just one person who has the belt and that person has to defend it against somebody else. It's not 2 random people fighting for the belt or a random draw. None of that. No, we don't want any of that after January 21st. We want a good 2023 with the light heavyweight belt. We want a good 2023 with the heavyweight belt. We want to see John Jones back in the ring. We want some good fights in 2023. Let's just say that. All right? So with that, do not forget to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you guys think about this Jamahal Hill versus Glover Teixeira fight. Let me know what you guys think about this whole light heavyweight division debacle and mix-up that's going on recently. Let me know who you think deserves the title shot. If you don't think it was Glover Teixeira and Jamahal Hill, let me know what you fucking think, ladies and gents. I love hearing your opinions. All right, I absolutely love it. It brings the most joy to my day. And with that, have a great fucking weekend.